Welcome to the Call to Flourish podcast, sponsored by Divine Mercy University. My name is Thomas Cronquist, and I'm the co-host with Father Charles Sikorski, the president of DMU. Father Charles, how are you today?
Really well. Looking forward to our topic and our guest today.
Well, Father, we have a very interesting episode this afternoon. We'll be talking with George Forsythe, who was a policeman for 25 years. Then he became a therapist, earning his counseling degree from DMU. In his practice, George only sees first responders, and he's going to tell us about his experience as a police officer and the mental health challenges first responders face. George, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. It's an honor.
So I'm really looking forward to this conversation, George. You know, we met you several months ago, and I was just fascinated by your story and what you're doing. And, you know, today it's so important. Our first responders and the pressures and stresses that they're under, to have people who they can relate to and you know, get help, to help them persevere. We really need to support and help our police officers, our firefighters, and so forth. So thank you so much for being with us. And how'd you get involved in police work, and what led you here?
Well, first of all, it is an honor to work with that population. As a retired Maryland State Trooper, I always said, you know, I worked with my heroes, and now I get to work with them again. And certainly not the best therapist out there. There are way more skilled men and women than me. But when it comes to understanding that job, especially from a police perspective, I think that that's where my expertise would be, because I certainly lived that as a Maryland State Trooper for 25 years. So I understand a lot of what they're going through. I understand a lot of what they're going through. I don't understand the current culture with this hatred, it seems like, of defunding the police, and the police are bad and everything else. There was always an element that didn't like the police or didn't trust the police. But nothing like I've seen in the last few years. And I certainly hear from the officers that come in here. But my journey, yes, started as a Maryland State Police cadet in 1984. I would have been about, I think I was about 20 years old. Because I was a cadet for 1 year. And as a cadet, you're not really a police officer. You're not in the academy. It's kind of like discerning. You know, you're discerning whether or not you're going to be a Maryland State Trooper, and they're discerning whether or not they're going to let you be one. So you do that for a year. You don't carry a gun. You just work with troopers doing whatever they need you to do. And then you enter the academy. And our academy is one of the few left in the nation that's a residential academy. So if you're to be a Maryland State Trooper, and I believe California Highway Patrol, maybe one or two others out there, you have to live there for 6 months. So it's like the military. You live there for 6 months. You get to come home on weekends if you don't get too many demerits. As Father Charles may know, I'm a bit of a class clown, so I spent more than a few weekends at the State Police Academy, which was in Pikesville, Maryland. The academy was in Pikesville at the headquarters at the time. Now it's in Sykesville. There's a real big, more modern facility. So I went in there in 1985, and I did my 6 months before I graduated. And I started like most troopers in uniform, big hat, side of I-95, flagging them down. They don't even do that anymore. We had to do that on the side, run out in traffic and flag them down. At the time, there has always been a bit of an interest in counseling for me. This didn't come out of left field. When I was in elementary school, I was seeing a guidance counselor named Miss Shears because of some family issues. I had to see her once a week. And I loved her. I had the biggest crush a third grader could have on a guidance counselor. And I remember one time I told her that I would like to be a counselor one day. And she said, "Why?" And I said, "Because I'd like to help people." Well, they had something called a happy gram when you're in elementary schools, a happy face and a memo, and handwrite some stuff to send it to you. It was like an attaboy, and send it to your parents. I still have it, where she said this story. So there was always a little bit of a desire to help people. I was always interested in psychology. I was always interested in philosophy and things like that. I read a lot. And very quickly, I became a detective. I was young. I graduated at 21. I turned 21 in May and graduated in June. So for a little while, I was the youngest Maryland State Trooper out there. I was very youthful. I grew up appearance-wise, and I grew up in an area of Prince George's County with a lot of crime. So I certainly understood crime. I'd seen it all my life. And I grew up very short. Only until my high school years did I grow taller and start lifting weights. So I learned to be funny to survive in a rough neighborhood. So I could easily gain trust from a lot of people. So there were some things in the works God was already doing that were already in the works. So I started in narcotics, and I didn't like it. I wasn't too good at it. I was in a unit that they did the electronic type of surveillance work. I'm not good at that. I didn't get the excitement. This is the Miami Vice days. I didn't get the excitement, one earring, out there doing things. And I went back to uniform. But in doing so, I met a senior investigator named John, and he was in something called a repeat offender unit, where they basically just went out and waited till these bad guys would mess up and they'd lock them up again. And he said, yeah, you should interview for that. And I did. I went up and interviewed for that. And the captain interviewed me, and he said, I'm going to put you in something called the special assignment unit instead. They do the contract murders. They do the gambling cases, vice cases, any kind of undercover case that's non-narcotic. We have a narcotics division to handle narcotics. You handle anything that's not narcotics. But, as you probably know, I definitely learned everything is narcotics. If you work prostitution, you're working drugs. If it's stolen property, you're working drugs. Most murders, drugs. Everything is drug related. But and I did that, and I stayed. I got under some guys that have been around forever. They became like my big brothers. I loved them to death. I learned so much from them. They were a very rough bunch of guys, but I learned so much from these guys. We had an office that was undercover at Spring Grove Mental Hospital. Nobody would ever suspect. They have houses at Spring Grove for kind of the higher functioning residential patients, and they'd live there in a group. And one house in the middle of all of them was us. And to be honest, you wouldn't have been able to tell that we weren't the residents the way we looked and acted. And we knew all the other residents from the houses. They would come by, they would talk to us. And that was my office for a long time. And there I learned, really honed my skills and became adept at undercover investigations. That's what I was known for, especially contract murders, going to jail undercover. I've been incarcerated 5 times undercover. I don't know how. I literally couldn't tell you how many times I've been hired to kill somebody, burn something up, rape, steal, whatever. They didn't know I was a police officer, obviously, but many times.
So they would hire you to, like, you were the guy who would go out. You obviously didn't do those things, but you would get somebody to make the contract, and then you would bust them.
Absolutely. That's what I did. They would hire me they're going through a divorce, and they're like, well, if why give up half of everything when I could get rid of somebody I hate anyways, and I could keep everything? And they'd hire a hitman, and something. So yeah, I did a bunch. That was what I was known for. That was what I would get calls from Baltimore County, Baltimore City, out of state. That's what I was known for, was helping out on those kind of cases.
Now that sounds dangerous and stressful.
Yeah, the dangerous part is when you go to make the arrest. Because if you think about it, there is only one person in the world who knows I killed his wife. And if something happens to me, then there's nobody in the world that knows I killed his wife. So I was always very careful, because sometimes we would pretend we actually killed him. We would go find the intended victim. We would tell them what was going on. We'd hide them. They'd give us something. I worked one time, for example. She was just graduated from high school, and so she had a bunch of the senior pictures used to get a stack of senior pictures when you were in high school that you could give to your family and everything else. The little pictures, the yearbook pictures type of thing. And she had a stack of them, so I took the whole stack in the bag and something else, and just show him that, hey, I really did it. Or I've done it before. We posed them. I went to Florida one time to get a victim, and we had some homicide detectives come with us, and we posed him as if he was really killed, and we didn't have any kind of fake blood or anything. So one of the detectives in his lunch pail had some kind of salad dressing that was dark, and he ripped his shirt. We took his shirt, first of all, ripped it a little bit, and then we put it over the ground, and we shot it. And then we put the shirt back on him and had that stuff on him, and he posed him. And I brought it back up to Maryland and said, yeah, here's a Polaroid. He's threw him in a swamp or something. So yeah, that was my expertise. And then I also was on a different narcotics groups through the years. Maryland State Police Major Narcotics Unit. Uh, uh, I was very confident in my role as an undercover officer, but looking back, I don't know that I was really a very good narc. I bought millions of drugs, but I don't know. I just felt like I could do better by doing that. But I was on a DEA task force in Baltimore City called the Violent Traffickers Initiative, and really love those guys. I love those guys to death. The city, mostly city police officers, but a lot of different groups. And then I ended my career 3 years. My last 3 years were in something called the Warrant Apprehension Task Force in Baltimore City. That's where Baltimore City has so many arrest warrants that other departments give them people to help them serve these arrest warrants. The state police gave them like 3 or 4. I was one of them. Baltimore County Police gave them some. Marshals gave them some. And you just go out and serve warrants all day long. When you get one, you call a wagon, put them in the wagon, and you have stacks of them. You just go out. And great, because it's not a lot of paperwork, but it's tons of action. All you were doing is searching houses and kicking in doors and running around trying to, people jump out windows and chasing them. And the paperwork was maybe a form, got the guy under the bed. Here he is. That was it. So I did that for my last 3 years.
Okay, so you did this for a total of 25 years. This kind of work.
Yeah, this kind of work. Yeah, mostly undercover. Probably 22, 21 years or so was all basically undercover, or soft clothes. Like in the fugitive unit, you just wear jeans and a t-shirt, or shorts and a t-shirt. You put a vest over top. You're not really undercover, but you're not in a uniform either.
How did some of these men react when they found out that you were a cop and not a contract killer?
Shocked. Shocked. They were, well, in Maryland, the penalty for solicitation to commit a crime is the penalty is the same as if you actually completed the crime. So if you're arrested for solicitation to commit murder, you're looking at life. You're looking at a life sentence. There's a woman, I don't know if she's still in there or not. She was a grandmother, and they gave her, I don't know how many years. Small world. I was working as a drug counselor, and one of the employees started at a methadone clinic. One of the employees said, "You worked murder for hires." I was in jail with a lady to work murder for hires. It was that grandmother. She said her name. I can't remember it now, but I was like, "Oh yeah, that was me. That was definitely me." She hired me to kill her husband. So, anyways, I'm in the fugitive unit now. This career took a toll on my personal life. It was a wreck. There's no other way to say it. I was divorced twice, living with a girlfriend. I had 4 kids, but they didn't live with me all the time. I got them a lot. I mean, as much as I possibly could, but and I love them to death. We're very. I was just with 2 of them in New York. I was with another one in Virginia. So I'm just, but anyways, my life was a wreck. My relationships, everything in my life was second to that job. Most of my career, I would have worked it for free. I just couldn't stop. I was a long time workaholic before I got on the job. And then this job just fed into it with the 24 hours, I don't know if it was the excitement or the satisfaction of, you work a big case and now it's all done and you get these guys, or I don't know what it was, but everything that was not this job, including my faith, everything was second to this job. I can't explain that enough. This job it was everything. And I was really good at it, really well known on the undercover side of it. I wasn't really good at it with staying out of trouble. I wasn't really good at it with paperwork, but when it came to the actual undercover stuff, dynamite. I was really skilled in it. And so my youngest at the time, Tommy, his mom calls me early in the morning. He'd been sick, and she said, the doctor called. They need Tommy to go to the hospital right away. This was early in the morning, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. You don't usually get calls from an ex-wife at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning unless it's something bad. And she said, they want him to take him to the hospital. It might be leukemia. And I was like, okay. I was getting ready for work. I was on a fugitive team. We always came out early, so I was awake anyways. So denial is pretty powerful. And so instantly I thought of all the times somebody I love said, they found a lump in her breast. It might be breast cancer. And then you find out later it's really not. Or, yeah, so-and-so is pretty sick, had to go to the hospital, looking at his liver or his kidneys, and you find out it's really nothing. So I think I was telling myself that kind of stuff. So she goes to the hospital. I hadn't even left the house yet. I was kind of waiting to hear from her. And she said, it's leukemia. And it's happening so fast. They need to take him by ambulance. You need to choose right now, University of Maryland Hospital or Johns Hopkins. Thank God I live in a city with Johns Hopkins and Maryland University Hospital. I mean, they're two of the best hospitals in the world. Johns Hopkins arguably is the best hospital in the world, but University of Maryland is really good also. So immediately, it was like a punch in the gut. I remember I was in the bathroom at the time. I fell down by the toilet and just started sobbing. I literally didn't know what to do. And that was unusual for me. To not think I could control everything in the world was unusual for me. I was a big, muscular, weightlifting guy, police officer working in Baltimore City. I thought I could handle literally anything by myself. I was a Christian in the fact that I believed in God. I believed in Jesus. I'd even made a profession of faith one time in an evangelical type of church. I grew up a Catholic, but I'd go to different churches and then come back to the Catholic church sometimes. But prayer to me then was, God's there to help you, but you better handle it yourself. Kind of like I always call it a Viking God, just kind of call me if you really need me, but you better really need me. Don't bother me with a bunch of little stuff. Don't bother me with, God, please let the field goal go through. We don't want those kind of prayers. So that began a journey that was the closest thing to hell I've ever seen. I mean, despite I refer to the cancer ward, kids cancer ward, as hell staffed by angels. They were some of the greatest staff because he went to both hospitals eventually. They were some of the greatest staff, the nurses, the doctors, all of them. So we're going through this and it's getting worse. He ended up having 2 forms of leukemia. I mean, I remember him screaming for God to kill him. I remember holding him down while he would say that, while he would beg for God to kill him. And, so his mom was, like, to me, a real hero. His mom never left the hospital. Maybe one time left for the one evening and he was there from February till November. So he's in the hospital and it's not good. I mean, there's one time we had to call the family in to say goodbye. So I had to stand out in the hallway, and each of my children, as they would go in and say goodbye, and they'd come out and they'd break down, and I'd hug them, and then the next one. It was bad. I'd stay at the hospital. They worked out a deal with me with the state police that Actually, my colonel at the time said, I'll move you to my staff. I'll call you when I need you, and I will never need you. So I still went out sometimes in the morning with the fugitive team because I just had to. I just work was my coping mechanism. Everything for me was work. At night, I drank. That was the only way to sleep. I just drank. I'd either drink with some of the city police officers would come get me, or meet me at a local pub in Baltimore City. There's the Hippodrome, and across from there was an Irish pub at the time. I used to go there. So while this is all going on, these horror stories, uh, just very quickly, I almost got in a fight with a doctor there, and they were going to remove me out of the hospital. Just a lot of stuff happened. I started Tommy. There was a stage while he could still eat. There was months that he couldn't eat. He was able to eat because of the drugs he was on. The doctor said he's going to crave meat and salt. And Lexington Market is like the Mecca if you're looking for meat and salt. And so I would walk to Lexington Market. He never ate hospital food. Anything he wanted, I'd get him. Crab legs, Thai food, bulgogi, steak, whatever he wanted. Either I would get it or I'd call one of the city police officers and they would bring it by. And they were great. They would come by all the time. There was always somebody coming. And there was St. Jude's Shrine is right up the street from Lexington Market. What 2 blocks maybe, Father Charles?
Something like that. Yeah, right there.
It's real close. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I would walk to St. Jude's Shrine every day, almost every day, 7 days a week. It was always open. Wouldn't be necessarily mass. I didn't know what time I was going to go there because it kind of depended what was going on with Tommy or what else I was trying to do. So, but I would go there every single day, and sometimes I would cry. Sometimes I would just sit there. Sometimes I would just be mad. Sometimes mass would be going on, or I'd come in during. I was there so much. A priest came over to me one time and said, I noticed you're here every day. Is there anything we can do? And of course, back then, I had the famous, what I hear from first responders my whole life. You ask if something's wrong. No, I'm good. I've said it a million times, and they all say it. Nah, I'm good. So I was the same way. Well, the calling happened. There was one particular day, and I don't remember it being any different than any other day. As I recollect, I know it was bright outside. It was sunny. So I leave St. Jude's, and I'm out front on those steps, and all of a sudden it just hit me, and it was words internally, clear as a bell. I want you to work as hard setting them free as you did locking them up. And that was it. Never happened again. Never happened before that. Nothing like that ever happened again. And I know it was a calling. I know that, because it stopped me in my tracks.
Work as hard to set them free as you did to put them in jail.
Yes, you did locking them up.
Okay.
You did locking them up. And I knew exactly what it meant. I knew it didn't mean necessarily being a defense attorney or an advocate. It's just I knew, like, without being verbalized what this meant, I knew. And I hear people talk about a calling as, I hear people talk about smelling roses, or I hear people a feeling of peace, or I hear people talk about this overwhelming love. I did not have that experience. Mine was terrifying to me. It was like, the only way I can describe it is if you can imagine being instantly laid open for a split second from getting slapped in your rear as a baby till now at one time. It was instant. No, I know you. This is it. And it didn't even demand it. Just said, I want you to. And that was it. And it was terrifying. So I didn't do much with it at first, other than think about it all the time. Maybe could be argued ran from it a little bit, because I was thinking, what how do you, I don't know anything about being a drug counselor. I knew it meant addictions, I should say. I didn't know anything about being a drug counselor. To me, 12-step groups are what you saw on television where, hi, I'm George, I'm an alcoholic. Hi, George. And then I didn't know what they did after that. So I didn't do much with it other than think about it all the time, and started to change my life. I ended the relationship I was living. The end of that relationship. I definitely was not a saint. Definitely uh, pretty roughneck. But um, but there was a change coming. There were changes happening in the way I looked at things. So fast forward, Tommy gets better. He's doing great now. He's 26. I have a beautiful daughter-in-law that's a daughter. She's not even a daughter-in-law. She's my daughter. He's been dating her since he's 18.
So he came through that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he beat it. Yeah, he beat it. I mean, there was a lot of times in there. My prayer while he was sick was over and over again, God, kill me and save him. And if I said that prayer once, I said it 10,000 times.
Yeah.
And because my perception was, as incorrect as it is, my perception was, if God spares him, well, then somebody's got to fill in that box. Somebody's got to go. You can't just say, okay, this guy can live, but well, I got this vacuum here, somebody that has to be killed. And that's the way I looked at it. As strange as that is, and I can laugh about it now. There was even a time that if he died, I was contemplating suicide, not out of depression.
Mm-hmm.
I was contemplating suicide, that he's not going to be able to navigate the afterlife without somebody to help him. Mm-hmm. And, why not me? I certainly deserved it. He didn't deserve anything. I had done enough. By this time in my life, I had done enough, plenty to do that. But he came through. And fast forward, my wife, the woman who's now my wife, knew about this calling. And I wasn't really doing anything with it, although I do believe at that time I started taking some community college classes. And I knew then about what it would entail. You can't just walk in a place and be a drug counselor. So she knew she had a conversation with me. She's my wife, Nikki, is my biggest source of support. I can't even, the one of the biggest blessings I've had is her. And so she told me, she said, whatever happened with this? I said, nothing. I'm working now. I've retired. I'm working now as a government contractor, making pretty good money, traveling around. I worked in Honolulu for 4 weeks, Boston for 4 weeks, New York, working as a government contractor, making good money. And I said, no, I'm not satisfied. It's not what I was called to do. And she knew what I meant. So she sat down with a spreadsheet. She's way more smarter than I am, especially when it comes to numbers. And she showed me. She said, George, we can do this. She said, and besides, if God really called you, then it's not going to fail. He's not going to call you. And, it's not like he's going to call you to something. You're going to do it. And he's going to start laughing and say, ha ha, sucker. He's not going to, that's not the way it works. So she laid it all out for me, and she said, we can do this. It'll be tight. Sure, it's going to be tight, but we don't have any money all the time anyways. It'll be tight. So I did it. I talked to a friend of mine named Tracy, who worked as in a residential treatment center near me in Annapolis, and got my first job there as a residential treatment assistant, which is kind of like the Oompa Loompas of residential treatment. You take them to cigarette breaks, wake them up in the morning, do a group every now and then, get their bags when they're leaving, that kind of stuff. $12 an hour. $12 an hour with a wife and 3 stepchildren. Well, they're my children now, but not a lot of money. And it just kept working out. And I became a trainee through Maryland, then a CSC and a CACAD. Worked my way up through, I got my bachelor's at Liberty University. And then came time at the end of Liberty University. Now we're like around December 2017. I had known now from working in with addictions in residential treatment facilities. I worked at a luxury facility. I worked at methadone clinics in Baltimore City. I had a pretty good idea now from the therapy end about drugs, and I had determined that this is just a Band-Aid. This is a mental illness that people are just using drugs and alcohol to cover up. And I decided I wanted to be a mental health therapist. By now, also my faith, I had re-engaged with the Catholic faith. I was going to Catholic church and had become involved in a Catholic church. So I'd been to a Protestant bachelor's, a Protestant university for my bachelor's. I wanted to get a Catholic understanding. And so I don't remember how I found Divine Mercy. I think it was an article in a magazine, and it was called IPS then, in this old magazine I saw, and I researched it, and that's when I saw that it was called Divine Mercy University. Somehow got accepted. Did that for 2.5 years. Still as a drug counselor that whole time until my internship, where I worked at Bay Area Christian Counseling. And then after my internship, I worked a period of time at a place specializing in pornography and sex addiction called Rogue River Counseling. And then I worked with a friend of mine at Lotus Psychotherapy before I started my own practice here, Driftwood Psychotherapy. Working primarily with police and first responders wasn't necessarily my intention in the beginning. It kind of I started seeing the need more and more and more. And it was an interesting niche. And I thought, well, I can certainly give back to that community. I know a lot about it.
Yeah. So what are like some of the more common things that first responders face? And maybe one of them, as you said before, oh, no, I'm good. I don't need any help.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But like, I'm sure there's drugs and alcohol,
oh, absolutely.
and family, marriage. Just tell us a little bit about what are some of the common things and really how the experience of the work kind of leads to some of these things.
First of all, trauma, PTSD, that's huge. Sometimes they don't even know it's trauma. They're just feeling these symptoms. They're feeling the symptoms come out like anxiety or depression or something else. But as you dig into it, it's trauma. So certainly PTSD. That's been things come and go. This week and last week, there's been a lot of that. Addiction, alcohol is king in those populations, and everything. Somebody gets promoted, let's go out drinking. Somebody dies, let's go out drinking. The Ravens win, let's drink. The Ravens lose, let's drink. Everything was let's drink. So so alcohol, sometimes drugs. I do run into drugs sometimes also. Usually it's abuse of prescription drugs. I've only had a few where it's cocaine or something like that. So drugs, alcohol, of course, depression and anxiety that plagues kind of all of us. They have some of the same problems we all do. I mean, they have loved ones that die. They have loved ones that die in accidents. They have loved ones that die, get diagnosed with a terminal illness and die. They have divorces. They bring their own past.
Yeah, you might do. So in the PTSD, what kinds of things happen on a job? I remember I was talking to a retired police officer, and she told me she would typically see 2 or 3 dead bodies a week, and became, kind of numb to it. And like, I don't know if you could give us a little input on the kinds of things that cause these traumas, and then they don't talk to anybody. You could.
Yeah, you don't talk to certainly. Well, trauma can be different. Something that's traumatic could be traumatic to you that's not traumatic to me. Mm-hmm. Most of the people in those careers are pretty resilient. Early on, they start seeing a lot of things. I remember when I was much younger, I was in the Carolinas. I was with some friends. We traveled down there, and there was a table full of young merchant Marines next to us. And we all started drinking together, so we're all having a great time. And one of the merchant Marines told me, he said, I'm on a ship 7 or 8 months out of the year. And he said, every day is pretty much the same. And one day I am seasick and I don't even know why. The weather's the same. I'm eating the same. What happened today that made me seasick that I wasn't seasick yesterday? And I'll get those questions coming in there of the classic is the firefighter or the police officer going around to the other side of their car or sitting in their car after a call and crying. And they don't know why they're crying. I've heard it so many times where, yeah, it was a fatal, horrible accident, but I've seen way worse accidents than this, much more horrible than this. I use the analogy of, I think these guys have a big tank strapped on their back full of a liquid. And this liquid, I'll just call it crap, the crap that you've seen and you've done. And it just fills up. And then one day through all these years, it fills up. And one day something happens, and that's the last thing that's poured out. And as the last thing that's poured out, it's the first thing to overflow. And that's what you see. So yeah, you're seeing this fatal accident and you're thinking, why did that set me off? Now, the question is, you got here from something else or a bunch of something else's, and you're just now noticing the symptoms. And these guys can have the symptoms for a long time. For example, with PTSD, you see the irritability, the increased aggression, the angry outbursts. Well, there's walking time bombs walking around out there right now. There always have been. Now with cameras on everybody's phone, we're starting to see that more. So they've always had these symptoms. So when the trauma kind of piles up like that's what they see, and it takes some digging. It takes some digging, and then many times it goes to their childhood. Expectations or things they learned as a child. There's something called the just world theory. You see it with the cognitive processing therapy. I'm taking a class in that right now, and they talk about this just world. And the just world is, if I do good things happen to me. And if I do bad things, something bad will happen to me. And you learn it really young. Little Johnny, you're not gonna go outside if you keep acting like that, or you're not gonna get dessert if you don't keep eating your dinner. Those kind of things. And it becomes hardwired. Right. Well, here I am as an adult and I'm doing something good, and whoa, something bad just happened. I can't make sense of that.
George, this is really, really interesting. And I'm wondering, there are probably a lot of people that are going to listen to this and they're going to identify with what you're saying. And they're going to think, well, I really would like to get some help, and if they wanted to contact you, for example, do you have a website or an email address that they could use to ask you questions to communicate with you? What would those
Absolutely be? Yeah, and I welcome that. I get emails from people not necessarily seeking treatment all the time. I get emails from a fire department. Fire departments. So, will you come here and talk to? They have these meetings with their guys. Would you come and just talk to one of our groups of guys of what things like PTSD is or something? So certainly, email is the best way. That is the best way to reach me. And that's the name of my practice. It's called Driftwood Psychotherapy. And I don't know. I know Father Charles was in the Maryland, Calvert County, Maryland. There's a little beach called Driftwood Beach that I've been going to since I was a kid. It's like my safe place. Mm-hmm. So I want my practice to be, above all, a safe place where somebody can come in here and they can say whatever they want, feel whatever they want. So Driftwood Psychotherapy at gmail.com. The website is Driftwood Psychotherapy LLC.com. And there's a contact me on there also. You can go there to the website, click contact me, and you can write whatever you want to write. Nobody sees it but me.
Tell me, George, you might very soon, Maryland, you're going to be able to do telehealth in other states. Is that right?
Yes, because of it's called the Compact. And I'm not sure what states. I know, like, for example, West Virginia, Florida, they've basically signed a compact that we acknowledge that all of our training and our certification process that you received in Maryland would be equivalent or acceptable here in, say, for example, Florida. And this way we'll open it up with telehealth, where it gives a client much more opportunity. Now, it'd have to be telehealth. You can't drive back and forth from Florida. But, for example, I work with police officers. it would really open it up for a police officer or a firefighter or a correctional officer, dispatcher, maybe in one of the compact states that can't find anybody with experience working with that population, now has somebody.
That's great. So if anybody out there from different states, you can also, look George up, send him an email or contact him.
Yeah, they can anyways. I'll help them find somebody in their state. If the compact has been approved, now it's working out the finer print that you have to do.
Great. Thank you.
Well, George, thank you so much for this very, very interesting episode. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to be very interested to hear your story. And I'm looking forward to having you back. Another episode where you talk more about the challenges that these first responders face and the therapies and the remedies and the advice you give them. I think that's going to be very, very helpful. And so we will have you back for that, and look forward to talking with you again soon.
Yeah, I look forward to it anytime. And if anyone wants to reach out to me with a question, I'm happy to answer to the best of my ability, or maybe help them find somebody who can give them the correct answer.